Thank you so much, Cyndi, for being here with us today. You are the secretary on the board of WIF. But for those who don't know, tell us what you do in the industry, in the local industry.
I am, for my real job, if you will, I am a reality TV producer. So I have worked in reality unscripted television for probably almost 23, 24 years now.
You know, reality TV, I think or unscripted TV always existed, but it kind of like took off,
Yeah,
at that
yeah,
time when we were kind of coming of TV age, right?
yeah.
So how did you know you always wanted to be an unscripted, or how did you get into it?
If I had a choice, I never would have picked it.
Oh,
I love television. I always wanted to work in television and entertainment, but I wanted to go scripted, and I fell into reality TV, unscripted TV. I had a friend who worked for a company called Banyan Productions. I don't know if you remember Banyan from
uh-uh.
Philadelphia. In the late 90s, early 2000s, they were TLC TV was Banyan. We had all the stories: baby story, wedding story, dating story, makeover story. And then we got Trading Spaces, and we just took off. Um, and when I moved back from Boston, they were looking for a receptionist in 1999, and I took the receptionist job, and that is how I started.
You are that story we tell film students all the time. You got to start at the bottom and
Yeah,
work your way up.
but
Yeah.
I knew everybody. It was a company that had maybe between 50 and 80 employees, depending on the year. I knew everybody from the interns to the executive producers. I knew every single person. I had a relationship with them, conversations every day. They would come to my desk and hang out like I was the bartender. I learned a lot about the industry and what I thought I wanted to do next. And I made the relationships with the people to make it happen. The best decision I ever made was being a receptionist.
Something that a lot of people may know or may not know about being a producer, whether you're an unscripted or you're in scripted or whatever, everything is about relationships. So,
Yes.
you
Yes.
usually the producers that end up being in it for a while are really good at that relationship building. So was that
Yes.
something that kind of just came natural to you, or something you really worked at?
Yeah, no, I think I have a personality for it. I think I love to just get into a room and get to know what's happening and see what's going on. And I think when you first met me, and I won't speak for you, but you can kind of feel my excitement, right? I have that. What's happening? Who's here? What are we going to do? That I always have that approach to it, and that just welcomes people. So I think it comes pretty natural for me.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we met, I knew we were kindred spirits. So,
Yeah.
you kind of have that like producer little like antenna that goes up. You're like, ah, that's someone. We
Yeah.
get it. We get it.
Yeah.
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 So you said you wanted to go into scripted first.
hmm
Was it what TLC was doing with content that made you stay, or was it something else?
It was the fact that back in 2000, 2001, a network would order 65 episodes or 100 episodes for a season, and you had work. It was the longevity of it. I stayed at Banyan for 10 and a half years, went from receptionist to supervising producer, and worked on probably a good 15 or 16 shows. Because whenever my contract was up, I just went to the next one. They're like, okay, we'll just move you over here.
I think TLC, that beginning, that dawning of reality TV, I think maybe even more so than now, but it really was like what families watched together. Like
hmm
I remember watching Trading Spaces with my family and my parents yelling at them painting furniture all the time and like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? That's solid oak, kind of thing. And just,
Yeah.
we watched it as a family. So, and that
hmm
I can't, I mean, I think there are some families who watch unscripted content together now, but it felt like it was like that, sitting down every Wednesday
Yeah.
night to watch it together.
It was, and that's actually what made Trading Spaces Family happen. If you remember that spinoff
Yeah.
where they actually had more people added to the mix, and it was great. And then we did Trading Spaces Boys versus Girls, where we did the kids' rooms. I worked on all three of them, which was fantastic. I got to work with all of them, but that's exactly why we did that, because it was a family show.
Mhm.
And so you just brought more family into it.
What are some of the things that you think are common misconceptions about unscripted and working in unscripted?
The first thing I would say is the money, because people think, oh, I'm going to work on a TV show. Not necessarily. I mean, it's not great, but it's good. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I would also say that creatively, people don't realize in unscripted how much story you have to create pre-shoot. And it's not that we're telling them what to say, but we do have to put people in situations to make a story happen. And then on the other end of that, people don't realize when that changes in the field, you better figure out how to make the story continue to find something else to do. It's not just, here's what you're shooting for the day, go shoot it and leave. And that is a huge, you can tell the people who are new to the industry, that's a huge misconception. Oh, we have to fix that now? Well, I thought we were just going to just do away with the scene. No, we got to keep going. And I think one thing that I've noticed a lot more later in my years is that people work like they don't think they're replaceable. And that really, it hurts, because starting 20 years ago, you knew you were replaceable. So you really wanted to make an impact, and you wanted to get the best show out of it. And now people just think, well, I'm just going to do this show and then you're going to take me with you to your next show, right? And that's not the case. So I think those are the biggest misconceptions. Yeah.
And what do you think are biggest audience misconceptions about unscripted?
It really depends on the type of show. I think when you get shows like the remodeling shows or the restaurant shows, like Restaurant Impossible I worked on, I think people are watching thinking, wow, you just roll in with the camera and go, right? This is amazing. That's great. How did they know that freezer was going to be available to buy a new freezer that day? They don't realize all the planning as a viewer. And that's kind of the magic of it though, right? You don't want them to think about what's been set up for them, but they really do. The more I talk to people and they ask me about a specific scene of a show I worked on, and I tell them, we had to nudge it a little bit, they're still surprised by that. They are absolutely surprised by that. And I love that about it. And as a producer, it's also very annoying, because I'm like, you have no idea the work that I've put into that scene. We didn't just turn the cameras on. But I also think if you get to like the bigger shows like Survivor and Bachelorette, there's so much that the audience has made up about what happens behind the scenes. It's like for bigger shows like that, they've kind of taken the production out of it, and they feel like they know the show. Like, oh, I know what they're doing. I know this. I know what they're doing after this. When they're done on that scene, they're probably all going off and sitting in a hot tub, right? That's what they think that they know.
Right.
Because they're following like the big brothers of the world. They think we're watching it all happen, right? It's just happening. So it's very interesting, the TV that I make and then the bigger shows, how the misconception is so different with the viewers.
And I'm curious, you talked a little bit before about like needing to kind of fix stuff on the fly. Is there like an example that you have of like something you had to fix and how you fixed it? If you can think of one of the many.
There's many, absolutely. But let's take Dinner Impossible. I just worked on Dinner Impossible for a season, and that you're going to this location. There's going to be about 50 to 100 people you have to cook for. But Robert really does come up with the menu on the fly. He really decides what he wants. So as a production crew, we try to work with him and his staff ahead of time to say, well, if we get this meat and we get this protein and we get these vegetables, we can absolutely make a meal out of this. And then you have Robert come on set and he's like, nope, that has nothing to do with where we are. I want this dish. So now on the fly, we have to find 30 pounds of a very specific lamb cut while we're on an island off of California. And you can't say no.
Right.
So things like that happen. And then the worst thing that happens, I think, to all of us is Mother Nature. You set up this beautiful video village. You show up the next day and it has been torn down by wind. And we have crew and talent showing up in 30 minutes. We got to make a show.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so much hustling behind the scenes to keep things moving as smoothly as possible. But things change all the time. I mean, they're building something on Trading Spaces and they would build it wrong. And we'd have to run out and get more wood for it. But we don't have that much time. So do they build the same thing?
Right.
Do they build something different? I mean, it goes from a little thing to a big thing, but it keeps you, every single day is different, which is why I absolutely love it every day.
It really feels like, and I think I've said this to you before, it really feels like indie filmmaking and unscripted are very akin. Like everything you're saying, we've dealt with in making indie, scripted content. So I bet people who have kind of like an indie film background do really well in unscripted and probably vice versa. So
Absolutely.
I know as a producer, when I'm working on commercial stuff, I know like sometimes I'm like, I need to hire people who've done indie stuff because they're gonna be quick on their feet more in this situation.
And that's exactly it. Quick on your feet because you got to make it happen. You don't have a studio backing something where it's like, oh, we'll just bring in a few more people to make that happen. Or
Yeah.
don't worry, we have a whole trailer rolling in for your new video village. You're fine. So yeah, quick on your feet. I love that.
Along the way, what have been some of the biggest surprises for you, good or bad, about working in unscripted?
I would say the good part that I just really wasn't anticipating, and still after all these years, are the relationships. Because when you're with these crews, and I used to travel with Trading Spaces, we would go on the road for a year together. We would travel for 2 weeks, come home for one, and then do it all over again. This was my family. And now you get smaller orders. You get like 6 episodes, maybe 13 episodes, so you don't travel as much. But when you're on the road, you are together all the time. When you're wrapping at 2 o'clock in the morning, you all are going to find that one pizza place that's open and eat together. You know, when you have a down day, we have to share vehicles. So let's all go on an adventure together. You know, the relationship still to me is one of the biggest surprises, one of the great surprises of the industry. And I love that. And I still every single day get so excited to go on set and think, what's going to happen today? Because I have a piece of paper that says this is what should happen, but I have no idea how it's going to end up. And I love that. I love it. That can also be one of the bad things too, because you just every day is different. Why can't I just plan one day?
Right.
And I think the one thing that still after all these years that really gets to me is it really is unfortunately still a boys' club. When you're on set, it's always, you know, give me some of the guys in here to move this couch. I played football. I could probably move that easier than them. Or, you know, let's get some of the guys over here to give their opinion about what we're going to do for this shot. Or even when I'm directing, I have had a camera operator look at my producer who was a guy and ask him, so is this going to be the best angle for them to walk in? It still happens. It still happens every day. And I think that is still a surprise to me.
I think though it's better for it to be a surprise, because if it's not a surprise to us anymore, we've kind of like just given up that that's the way that it's always going to be. Yeah. So I'd rather be surprised and disappointed.
I like that. I like that.
That's just jaded. Great. Yeah, but yes. I'm curious because today you're on set when you weren't planning on being on set. Like that's another thing. And that bleeds into your life. And you're also a parent. Like how has living and being on your toes, that sort of thing, though, helped you be a parent or helped you in life?
You find a way to get everything done because that's what I do for a living. And that's what I do for the family. You find a way to get it done. You have to be okay to go on the fly. And once your child and my wife see me do that, they get it. Like, okay, well, we understand you have to go. Yeah, go ahead, do it. We'll find something to do today. But I really do think that my strength is in organizing and task making and going with the flow. And all of that is parenting, all of it. And to the point where my daughter got this from my wife, but we'll be sitting down at dinner doing something and I'm telling them to move something around. They're like, you do not have to produce our dinner. It's okay. We could just have dinner. But yeah, you can't turn it off, which is good. I think good more than bad, really, because it's just, you don't miss anything. Yeah. I love that. You just get it all in because you can.
Well, and if your household is anything like mine, maybe your wife balances you with being the opposite energy, which is helpful. Yeah.
Yes. It's nice to be brought back to reality every once in a while.
I've known people who have worked in unscripted, and a lot of people that I've known don't really last as like very long. Like there's a high burnout rate. And so I'm curious, like what has been your secret of keeping in the game for as long as you've been in it?
I can't tell you my secrets, Lindy. I mean,
just
I want to keep working.
Right.
If you work in this reality TV specifically, the people who have been in it long enough, from the days when we would have longer orders and work together as a crew more, I think those are the ones that kind of stick it out because you know what it used to be and you know what you need to put into it to get the good show and to get the good crew and to really make it work in every aspect. And I think the younger that the crew gets, the first thing I notice is one, they're always disappointed when it's not a big celebrity on the show. And then two, they're always disappointed when they realize once the show's done, they have to find their next job. And they don't want to be responsible for that. They just don't want someone to take them with them. So I think that can cause an early burnout for people. And then they end up just going somewhere else and doing something else. I think for me, I haven't gotten burnout because it is new, and I haven't gotten burnout because I've found a way to make it work. There is a very, very hard work-life balance in this industry, as I'm sure you know.
Hmm.
It's not that we don't want the work-life balance. It's just that you can't always set your travel schedules. So I don't know now if I'm going to be traveling near the holidays in December. I don't
Right.
know. So I can't plan a vacation with my family. Also, am I going to be working after the holidays to even pay for a vacation, right?
Right.
So I think that causes burnout too, just having to find your next job, find your next paycheck, not being able to set your schedules, missing graduations, missing concerts, missing something. That wears on people after a while. And if
Hmm.
it's not something that you want to keep doing and you don't believe and love the work that much, you're going to move on to something else.
Do you see any changes in the industry going to trying to be somewhat more stable or be somewhat less of a boys club, or do you see like changes in a direction?
I will say, I think the remote working has changed to make it more stable
Mm.
because I'm working for companies out of New York and LA now from Seattle. And, 10 years ago, they would not have done that.
Right.
So I think that really helps. And to be able to be home when my kid gets home from school, knowing that I'll take a 2-hour break and then go back on the computer later for a couple more hours to finish some things really helps.
Right.
And that the fact that more companies are open to that, I think is great. Um, the male club, I wish I could say the boys club would change, but it hasn't in
Mm.
23 years.
Yeah.
So all I can do is just keep doing what I do and representing um, in a very polite way. And I think I do that pretty well.
Hmm.
I used to yell at people when they'd say, I need a guy to move the couch. Or a girl, show a girl. I learned to not do that anymore. I just learned to step in and say, I can help with this.
Hmm.
And they see that rather than pushing them away saying, oh, another one of those. So I
Right.
think the promotions part hurts a little when the boys promote their friends.
Mm.
And like I said, now my interns are my boss.
Right. Right.
That's always a hard one because I know that I've way more experience, but that's not something that you can't predict that because you want to take the people that work well with you. You want to take the people that you like working with, and you don't really think about whether it's a boy or a girl or non-binary person. You just take them.
It comes into how do you influence with the power that you have, right? In any given
Yes. Yeah.
situation. So
Hmm.
how do you find the little ways to do what you can do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Delving into a little bit more about, I always love to talk about ethics and
Yes.
unscripted and ethical discussions around how people and stories are portrayed versus the needs for dramatic and compelling stories can get a little complicated. So I'm curious,
Yes.
like, what guidelines do you follow and your feelings on approaching ethical issues with shows that you work on?
I love that you asked that because many people don't want to talk about it or just don't think about it. And it is huge. It's huge. Personally, when I'm on set, the personal safety of me and my crew is first. Then how I represent the company
Hmm.
is second, and then the show. And a lot of companies think show representation safety.
Right.
I hate to say it, but it's true. So if I'm setting up a scene, for instance, I set up a guy to go to a strip club. He was in college, and we set it up so he could do a routine one night on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And we also made sure his mom was in the audience. Now, some people may say that is really horrible. Why would you do that ethically? But to me, we didn't do anything illegal.
Hmm.
He didn't get hurt, but man, it made a good drama-filled scene for sure, right?
Right.
Then there's instances where I've literally had someone on camera get into an argument with a homeless person, unfortunately, and that person started chasing my talent on the street.
Mm.
And I will tell you honestly, I kept filming it. I did not stop it. I did not step in. And even when my camera guy went through traffic to get the shot, I was on his back. Now, that takes away from my safety aspect of it, which I will never do again. But I did do it for that scene. And I did not stop the argument because it ended up being a really good scene. It was a really good lesson for this person.
Hmm.
And there were no weapons.
Hmm.
So there's been multiple times where I've had a fight happen on camera and you let it go. You got to
Hmm.
let it go because that's the scene. Now, if there's a weapon involved, obviously that's a very different story. But some people will say that is just not ethical. Making sure there's alcohol in a scene with people who are of age and are not driving,
Hmm.
right? You're of age, you're not driving. Hey guys, there's a bar over there. You know that's an open bar. I'm not telling them to drink. I'm not making them drink, but we all know that makes really good TV.
Yeah.
So there is a line for sure.
Right. And what are the conversations that you have with talent? Like, is there any blurring of them thinking they'll be a little more bold because you'll be there to save them? Or are they understanding that you're here to be a fly? You want to I'm curious, like, is there any
Hmm.
discussion between you and talent about like what's happening in those kind of situations or could happen?
When it's like a host or a designer or someone that's part of the show,
Right.
there's a discussion. They like to know they're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to push some buttons here. You give me a sign if it's too much."
Hmm.
So those discussions do happen sometimes. When it's a reality person who's literally a real life person we're putting in front of a camera for 6 months,
Right.
they don't even know to have those discussions.
Mm.
They are just in the front of the camera and they just go. And then
Hmm.
it's up to me to decide when I need to intervene. But we tell them, don't worry about us. You just do your thing,
Right.
and we'll move you along as we see fit. So it's very different depending on who it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if certain personalities are like, oh, well, I'm on camera, so I'm going to do something more than I wouldn't
Oh
necessarily do,
yes,
right? In real
yes,
life and
yes.
get yourself into more
Hmm.
trouble or more
Hmm.
tricky situations. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I will say, some reality shows where we're going to have people on camera for months at a time, they have to pass a psychological test
Mm,
it's part of the casting process. Because we want to make sure we're not putting someone who's very vulnerable into a situation that could harm them.
sure.
I will also say I've seen a company pass somebody because we knew they were going to be a great story and they probably shouldn't have.
Mm,
So the ethics is always going to be in the background of unscripted television, always. And it's even part of my crew. I mean, I held a producer's paycheck because she owed me $12 in petty cash. Now,
hmm.
ethically, that's stealing. But man, did that cause an eruption in the company? Because she
Right.
complained to everybody, like, "Why are you holding her check? She's taking our money. I don't care if it's $12 or $200." So, I
Right.
mean, it goes behind the scenes too. It's not just what we put in front of the camera.
Right. Have you that's interesting. I'm curious because I know in narrative, like if
Mhm.
we're doing something that's like a really tough scene emotionally,
Yes.
that it tends to emotionally affect the crew as well.
Mhm.
Do you find like when you're in these kind of tough spots that like it bleeds into the crew and you're kind of having some of those dynamics happening behind the scenes too?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes that does happen. I've definitely done a lot of interviews about emotional stories, and there's been some tears. Um, and I've gone back to Video Village, and you can see some of the crew are really, because they've either related to the story, or maybe I had an instance where one person said, "I think you push that interview too far."
Mm,
I mean, that's a personal opinion. I don't think I did. It was a really great scene, and she talked about what you wanted to talk about openly. But you do have crew members that are affected by it. And I will tell you, and I don't know if this is going to make me look really good or really bad, but I'm going to be honest.
hmm.
I had a producer in the field. I was a post supervisor at the time. I had a producer in the field. I was trying to feed interview bites. This is what I'm going to need. She called me, and it was an emotional topic. It was about murder. She called me about an hour later, sobbing. And I just stopped her. I said, "Did that person you were interviewing see you cry?" And she said, "Yeah, I had to leave the interview. I couldn't do it." I said, "Okay, I didn't fire her on that spot. I had her come home, but she was fired, and then I flew out and finished the interview."
Mm,
If you can't emotionally handle it and find that line in yourself to take your personal feelings out of it, especially when you're sitting across from them,
hmm.
you can't do the job. Now, some people say ethically, you do not give her a chance.
Mm,
And some people say ethically, you save the show. I think it goes both ways, but I made the decision that I don't think you're the type of person that's going to handle it. I'm not going to keep you here. Go find something else to do, right?
right.
So it does affect the crew. How can it
Hmm.
not? Some of
Right.
these stories, right? But
Yeah.
I think that's what keeps you in the business as long as I've been in the business as well. I'm known for being one of those people that can shut it off, get the story, still communicate, and still relate with these people sitting across from me, but I'm not going to get so emotional that I break down or that it's going to stop me from doing my job. I still
Right.
have a whole scene to shoot after this. So it's also another thing that could cause burnout, I guess, in some people.
What are your systems then for kind of like processing all that once you've gotten what you've needed, and so that you're able, because like that can build up if it and
Yeah.
backfire. So like how do you process it once you're done and you're going home, or you're
Did
off
my
for the
wife
day?
have you asked that question? That
No.
sounds a lot like her.
Yeah.
Um, that's another question I've never been asked. I think the processing comes from when you're sitting with your producers or executive producers at the end of the night and you're talking about the scenes and doing the hot sheets and looking over some notes. You kind of just gradually start to naturally talk about it,
Hmm.
and you talk about how it affected some people and how it didn't affect other people. It's part of the natural conversation, and I feel like I'm able to process it enough with the people I work with
Hmm.
that I can't really think of a moment where I've brought it home with me. And I mean, and I've sat across from murderers and I've interviewed murderers and heard very extensively how they committed their crimes.
Hmm.
And I just think by being able to talk about it with my crew after getting the notes, again, it's all about a job. It is my job. Getting
Right.
my notes together, getting everything in that needs to be in. I'm able to take a breath after that and say, okay, I've wrapped that one up and I'm moving on. And I'm okay with that. And I know some people are not, but that's how I work. I'm okay with saying, okay, let's move on.
I also think, I mean, probably that's what draws you to football, because I know also in your life, you are a women's football coach. And so
Yes.
probably going out on the field and running and doing some tackles and throwing some things probably helps as well.
Yes. I do miss the playing days. Because that was a great stress relief. um, but coaching is exactly the same. I coach the Seattle Majestics here in Seattle. Um, and it's exactly the same. You can't sit here and think about what you did wrong on that one play and miss the next three plays
Hmm.
mentally.
Hmm.
It's not going to benefit anybody. It's certainly not going to benefit the team. And as a coach, I can't focus on what that one person did completely wrong without pulling them aside and saying, this is exactly what you did. Don't do that one again. And then notice if they do it again or they don't do it again, right? I can't get too upset about it. I can't get wrapped up in one thing. We have a whole game.
Right.
Anything can happen. So I
Right.
do think it definitely, it's the same thing. All right, that game's done. We'll watch the film later. Once I've watched the film and made my notes for practice, that one's done. I'm moving on. I'm not
Right.
going to talk about that game 4 months from now. And people do. Do
Mm.
you remember that one play in the second quarter? No, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, more thinking about the whole rather than getting,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's something that we struggle with as humans, right? Like
Hmm.
how do we not have how do we give space for those things that they upset us,
Yeah,
or whatever, but how do we not have
yeah.
them in the driver's seat?
Again, another tough line, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we
Absolutely.
are humans
Yeah,
ish.
sometimes. Some might think in your line of work that the human less is less, but
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think that
yeah,
there's, yeah.
definitely. Been called heartless many times in a good way. So I'll take that.
It depends who's telling you it, right? Like if it's your
Exactly.
boss, they're probably real
Yeah.
jazzed about it. And if it's
Oh, yeah.
someone else, yeah.
100%. Like, oh,
Yeah.
send in the heartless one. We need tears.
Yep.
Okay.
So what are the shows? Because you said, you're working on one show doesn't necessarily guarantee your work on the next one.
Hmm.
What are the shows that you're drawn to? What are, like, as you now in this part of your career, and you
Hmm.
probably have a little more choice than you did earlier on. What are the types of shows that you gravitate towards more, that you really want to work on?
I'll tell you what I don't gravitate towards.
Okay.
I don't like the Love Island and the love reality shows. I just don't connect with that.
Right.
So if I can't connect with it, I don't really want to be stuck in that world for 3 months to a year. You just never know what the contract is. So I just want to find a connection. Like I love working on restaurant shows because it's such an amazing business and you learn something new every day. You can learn from the restaurant business and take it in your real life. And there's just so much drama naturally with restaurants that it makes really good TV. I love remodeling shows for the same thing. You have no idea what's going to happen on a remodel, how people are going to act, um, and I'm driven by that. I love seeing people after makeovers. I worked on 2 makeover shows. I love babies. I've sat through delivery footage while I'm eating my bagel in the morning. I'm like, oh, that baby's so cute. I love that.
Hmm.
I was offered a job once or a job interview, I should say. I can't say I would have gotten the job on Deadliest Catch. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be on a boat on the water. Like, I don't relate to that.
Yeah.
So I try to go towards the shows that I could sort of relate to, that I could sort of have some interest in, because if I'm not interested in the subject, it really doesn't help you with the job.
Yeah. Otherwise it just becomes a job
Yeah.
and then you'll probably burn
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And then you might burn out. Exactly.
Yeah. So you said that you've done some post supervising. Does that
Mhm.
mean that you're helping craft the edit, or what is it
Mhm.
that you're doing in that post role?
I've been a post producer, which means I literally will get the footage, watch the footage, and make the script. And then
Mm,
I'm crafting the episode with what they gave me. That
mhm,
I've done that. Post supervising, I was in charge of a whole editing wing of a company. So, 19 edit bays, you have the online bays, the audio bays. So as the supervisor, it was my job to not just schedule all that stuff and keep it maintained, but also work with the post producers on their shows to make sure I had all of their deliverables, the network clocks, what do they need paperwork wise, how do they want their masters delivered. So we deliver everything that they want. I also had
mhm,
to make sure if there were sponsorships for the show, that we got the sponsor in the show for the amount of time it was supposed to be in the show, and we did it correctly. It's also QCing. When I was post supervisor, I would QC every episode of every show through the online and audio, just for new eyes on everything, because you
mhm.
can never have too many eyes on something. So it was a multi-layer process when I was souping.
I would love to circle back because the ethics question, I think, comes back to like when you're writing the script. What are you thinking about when you're just kind of like handed the footage, and the ethics in that in them? Because editing is manipulation, no matter if it's for any project,
Yeah.
right? You're
hmm
manipulating. So how do you think about that power of manipulation when you're writing that script in the post?
It's a twofold answer. My first part of that is when you sign up to be on a reality show, you have to know that what you say on camera, we can do with what we want.
Hmm.
What you do on camera, we can do with what we want. You're signing up for this. Read the contracts, right?
Right.
You need to know that we have access to that. So there's a part of me that just can't feel bad. If that's what you want to do and you want to sign up for a show, this is what it's going to be.
Hmm.
The second part of just being on the post side of it is I haven't connected with these people. I didn't spend weeks interviewing them, talking on the phone, sitting in front of them, walking through shots. So that disconnect is gone. If
Mm,
I see something funny or I hear a soundbite that's going to look good over this shot, I'm going to use it, and I don't have to
mm,
worry about it because I don't know them that well.
right.
So it makes it a lot easier for me. And I will tell you one on ethics. I'll tell you one story. Of all my years of doing TV and all the people I've had in the scene, there's only one person, and I'm not going to say the show or the person. There's only one person that I literally said to them, after this scene, go directly to the bathroom. Do you know why I said that, Lindy?
No.
Because we can't legally record anything in a bathroom. Your audio, not
Mm,
only record, but listen in. We can't have video in there, and we can't listen into your audio, because how many times have we cut where your mic is still on and I still have my earphones on, and I
right.
hear you say something to that person and I'm totally going to bring up in the next scene. We can't legally do that in the bathroom. And this person was in such a vulnerable state
Mm,
that I wanted her to just stop and go to the bathroom so I could go in and tell her no.
right. Right.
Because you also don't want your bosses to hear you say that either. What, you're telling them not to talk about that? But she was very vulnerable about this specific topic, and I did
Mm,
not want it to go off the rails. So deep down, I have a heart, but it
of
takes a
course.
lot to bring it out.
Yeah.
And I've only used that line once in my career.
So I know I want to get you back. I'm just curious if you want to kind of give through for those who also may not know, because we have members who are coming into the industry and as well as we have seasoned people. What is your typical day in the life like when you're on set?
First of all, it's going to be at least 12 hours. Just know that. So it's going to be a long day. Rain or shine, indoors, outdoors, all types of weather. Just mentally get that in your head. But a typical day in life is you wake up, you go down, you meet your crew in the lobby of a hotel, you all move to a set, and then it's just go, go, go. You are literally setting scenes. You're giving notes to your talent. You're giving notes to the people in the scene. You're telling the crew what the next 4 steps are to be prepared. You're making sure you have everything you need for the whole day as far as props or some cases food.
Hmm.
You're checking everything and make sure you have everything to be successful that day. And then it's just a matter of going in order, scene to scene as best you can, And as soon as the bomb gets dropped, be ready to shift. But you have to be thinking in your head, this scene could fall apart. We can move to that location if it does. You have to know that.
Mhm.
Your coordinators have to know that. Your PAs have to know that. So when you say we're moving or plan B, you're out, you're gone. But it's, a set it's live, it's moving. There's a lot of
Right.
action. There's people everywhere. There's equipment everywhere. There's so many things that happen that you do know about, that you don't know about. But you just got to be ready to go from the moment you get on set to the moment you're sitting in your minivan riding back to your hotel, because anything can happen and it's going to be a long day. But man, is it exciting. And then you go to bed late. You're doing your notes late in your hotel room by yourself. You're not out partying. There's no time for that. Maybe you're getting a pizza delivered because it's the only thing open. Doing your notes, sending them off, going to bed, waking up, and doing it again.
and how the lovely, the glamorous life of being on the road. How much prep do you do so that you have all those? Because that's the other thing people don't realize. Yes, there's the set component, but a good producer is just as much time in the prep. So how much prep do you usually have or do before you even arrive to a place?
It's going to depend on the show, obviously. If I'm doing a show that's high in interviews and we're telling a story, then you usually have about 2 to 3 weeks of prep to get to know the people. In some instances, I had to research court cases and transcripts. So you want to make sure you have all the details. You want to make sure you get to know these people, get into their life, because the more they're comfortable with you, the better it's going to be story-wise. So that could take 2 to 3 weeks of just nonstop calls, research, and writing of ideas. And every idea you write, you do have to write a backup plan. What's my backup plan? Always. But if it's just like I'm trying to think of a show where I wouldn't have as much prep, I would say, the Restaurant Impossible shows, maybe a week's prep for an episode. And that's basically to figure out the story of the restaurant, figure out the story of the family. Why are they not succeeding? Looking over the P&Ls, looking over area comps of other restaurants, and then just kind of figuring out how can we teach them in a short amount of time how they can make this better and this better. And most of it's on Robert Irvine, who's the host, who's very, very hands-on when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that only needs like a week prep, and it's just a couple of phone calls and some research. But some of them can be 3 to 4 weeks of research.
And is it just you, or do you have a team?
I'll always have a team. Always have a team. There's always a producer and an AP, and your associate producer is one that kind of helps you gather the prepping materials or information or phone numbers of people to call or checking out locations. Then you have a location scout that will go get pictures and send them back to you. There's always a production manager who, helps with all the legal stuff. Where do we get the permits? How many releases do we need? Who's going to be on camera? That kind of stuff. And now we have a wonderful COVID team. So we get the names of the COVID people and who has to test, who's going to be on set, who's traveling, how many days in advance. So you're never doing it alone. As far as the research part goes, every producer always has an AP to work with. And then later in the process, you bring in the director, executive producer to kind of run through, this is how we envision it. What are some changes you see we should make?
Well, thank you so much for giving us this great insight. I know I learned a lot. I know I'm going to go watch my favorite reality TV and think about all the things that I know now that I didn't know before. And I know you got to get back to it.
I'll see you in the next board meeting, probably.
That's right.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.
You too.